chug, 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 chug,
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Wizard Staff Podcast. I am your host, Blake.
And I'm Guy.
And we are two drunk novices who like to talk about EDH. We do drink and swear, so you've been warned. Please drink responsibly when playing children's card games. Tonight, Guy and I are back at it. We're back here with another episode. And you may be thinking, okay, they're going to talk about March of the Machines. Yes, but also no. Kind of.
But also, yes.
We are doing things a little bit differently. This is not going to be a set review episode. Instead, March of the Machines, at least for me, really sort of made me sit down and reevaluate what I currently think of the Magic the Gathering story and how the plot and storylines across the years of Magic's lore have been told. And I'm like, you know what? I'm feeling inspired. Let's do a whole episode about our feelings on the MTG lore. And that's what this episode is. Feelings on MTG lore. So that all being said, I do want to give like a little bit of a disclaimer. You know, like these are just our opinions, two guys on the internet. We are not MTG lore experts. There are other channels or podcasts that are specifically dedicated for that purpose, and they're pretty good. And Guy and I have listened to those, and they're very informative. We're glad they exist, but we would not identify as a lore channel whatsoever. But we are looking through all these stories through our own perspective as quote-unquote average Magic players. Like, we're a little bit like long-term players who've been playing for a number of years, but we know a little bit, but nothing and not a whole lot. So we may disagree with you. We may even disagree with each other at certain points that we bring up, but the story is also constantly evolving and changing, and our feelings on the story will probably change because of that. And who knows what Magic's story is going to be like and how it's told in, like, say, 5 to 10 years. So all of this is sort of a time capsule. We're just talking about the here and the now and where Magic's at right now, and we want to talk about it.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool that we have been able to play Magic in the 2 times that they've done what they call an event set, and that's like the pinnacle of the storytelling that they've been building up to. The first one being War of the Spark, which was about 5 years ago at this point, which feels like, you know, it was only just yesterday.
Yeah.
But this is the second time that they've done that, and I know that they had some complaints from the first time around, so I feel like, you know, this is their chance to do it a second time. But it is only their second time, and I feel like they're still learning, and I think, you know, there have been some improvements, but, you know, we'll dive deeper into it. But of course, what are we drinking?
Okay, so I just went to a local place and picked up a 4-pack of, oh gosh, how do you pronounce this? A thiolized hazy pale ale?
I can't tell you because I can't see the bottle.
It's by Lad and Lass Brewing in Seattle, Elfin Flight. And the reason I bought it is because there's all these origami-shaped butterflies on the background of like a rainbow gradient, and I'm like, this looks like Neon Dynasty Kamigawa. I'm gonna buy it.
Nice. Mm-hmm. You should have bought that for our Neon Dynasty Kamigawa set, but you know, it's okay. You're
better
just a little
late
late
than never. You know, I didn't see it when I went at that time, so we're doing it now, baby.
Yeah, and I mean, we're on Kamigawa partially for the set, so it kind of works.
Kinda. How about yourself?
Well, you know, I make fun of you for not knowing or, like, being late to the party, but I actually, you know, a friend gave me a bottle of wine, and I was like, cool, I'll drink this on the next podcast. So I pour myself a glass, and I can't even tell you, like, what it said on the bottle. I just know that it's a white wine. But it's
all right.
It's nice. It's like very subtle, and I was trying to think, like, how do I describe this wine? I've been drinking on this podcast for
all these years, and we still don't have the vocabulary on how to describe alcohol.
I have not.
I'm still terrible at it.
Yeah, I don't have the technical terms to describe what this actually is, and
You're
so
I don't know,
feel
it's
bad.
good. I'm drinking it.
Yeah, basically. So I can't tell you, one, what the bottle's called, or two, how it tastes. So my opinion.
Does it not have a
now,
label?
It has a label. I just didn't think to read it that closely.
Oh my god.
It had some flowers on the front. It seemed like it was
had
kind of
words on the label,
Yep. There we go. There's that famous Blake banter.
You're welcome.
Yeah. All right. Why don't you just dive us right in?
All right. Starting at a broad scope of things, I thought it'd be good to sort of just briefly discuss Magic the Gathering lore told throughout the years. I don't know, Magic's been around for 30-ish years. So overall, it started with the first couple of sets, alpha, beta, and all that. And the first bits of lore were incorporated into flavor texts, oftentimes like these names of characters we mentioned, and the first few Magic players must have been who's this? And they're not going to find out for another 5 to 20 years, because sometimes Magic designers like to do that, where we're going to drop a name and then not tell you for 20 years. Anyways, they also told the story through novels. I have not read any of these novels, full disclaimer.
Neither have I.
Yeah, I have listened to other channels do synopses of these novels, and it's very interesting how Magic will get these fantasy writers and have them write the entire book, and some of them hold up against the test of time. Some of them were reasonably well written for what was asked of them. Then as the years pass, we see fewer novels, and we start to see more articles on the Wizards of the Coast website. All these articles obviously aren't as long as the novels. They're shorter, but they're still they still take a couple minutes to read, and oftentimes they're by different writers. And so Magic has done that for a number of years, and until recently, that's how it's continued to be. There's been some fluctuations. Sometimes they've stopped doing it, and then the community figureheads have been what the heck, this was so good, or this was a critique, but it was still good in this aspect, and then they brought it back. And have done that for a number of years, and then it's been, I'd say, more recently where Wizards of the Coast has come out with podcasts, most notably the Magic Story podcast, which at the time of recording, there's about 30-ish episodes, each about 30 minutes. I binged all of them in 2 days in preparation for this episode. And it's been really nice. I'll say this, so all these different mediums have been used to tell the story of Magic, and I really benefited from the podcast version because I'm really good at binging a whole bunch of podcasts. That's the medium I like. And it's been interesting where the start of the podcast had this host and then guest, and so it's often 2 people, and it's not been until recently where it's had 2 Wizards of the Coast staff members dedicated to truly telling the story, and telling the story as if you're a new player, so no matter what's going on in the recent set, you'll know what's going on. And I think that's a great idea. I think if they can continue that approach and method going forward, and the hosts stay the same as they currently are, then I can see that being a really successful podcast, and I will definitely continue to listen to that because that's a form that I really benefit from.
I also picked it up.
What did you think?
I like it. I think that this is actually, because I started to read the story when it was coming out for March of the Machine, because I was okay, I know the lore semi well enough to be able to pick it up now, kind of know where we're at, but I just found that like the wall of text that was in front of me, and it was just like going on and on. I was like, I can't do this. Like, you get a picture every, few paragraphs, and I was like, I need more. I need Dr. Seuss to like illustrate this for me. So I did find out about the podcast because you told me, and I was like, okay, I'll listen to some of the episodes. So I've picked it up since the newest hosts have taken over. I didn't go back like to the very beginning, but I do enjoy how they're presenting the podcast because they have like a commentary, or they can like explain things that I am not privy to from the last 30 years previously. So they gave me context, and then they also do it in a pretty timely fashion. Like, yeah, you said 30 minutes. I think that's like the longest it's been. So it's nice. It's very easy. Got through them very quickly. And I was like, all right, I'm caught up to at least where they're at, which is like, at this time of recording, halfway through like the Phyrexian All Will Be One, the last set.
I think in a way it sort of makes a lot of sense where they're trying this new podcast medium, and their approach is like, hey, you listening, you're a new player. And I think that's brilliant because from what I understand is that Magic's player base is bigger than it's ever been in its entire history of existing, and that's only been within the last couple of years, especially coinciding with the popularity of Commander. And so I think that's just really wise move to sort of orient your new podcast towards new players.
Yeah, and it also, the other thing is just, it does benefit from the fact that there's also been several other Magic podcasts that have been quite successful. Command Zone being probably the most notable. You got Drive to Work, Limited Resources. So we do know that as Magic players, we are kind of keen to podcasts. So I think it is a great idea that they decided to pick this back up again and say like, hey, for those who aren't as privy to the story, here's another way that you can get into it.
Again, staying on that big scope picture here, but early sets like Alpha to Alliances from 1993 through 1996, they had very little lore. As I said, wouldn't like do a name drop or like name a plane and then not talk about it for like a number of years. They didn't really have much time to care about the lore because they pretty much just like printed these cards and then they just like flew off the shelf. And then like that's like the infamous stories about like Alpha and Beta, right? Is like they just printed it and it immediately sold, and they like were like, oh fuck, like we gotta print more. Like what can we do? Like let's use some common tropes. Like Arabian Nights, just use all those tropes. All right, print a set, boom, sold instantly. So they weren't really focused about the lore in like early history of printing cards and making cards. And then I'd say it really developed a couple years later, stronger, when it started to create like the block structure of sets where we would stay on a plane for about 2 to 4 sets at a time. There was like Mirage Block starting in like 1996. And there was a whole bunch after that. There was Tempest Block, Urzas, Masks, Invasions, Odyssey, Onslaught, Mirrodin, Kamigawa, Ravnica, Cold Snap, Time Spiral, Lorwyn. Then you got Shadowmoor, Alara, Zendikar, Scars of Mirrodin, Innistrad, Return to Ravnica, Theros, Khans of Darkir, Battle of Zendikar, Shadow over Innistrad, Kaladesh, Amonkhet, all the way to Ixalan in 2018, which at time of recording was only 5 years ago. So like that's from like 96 to 18, a majority of Magic's history at this point. Like most of it has been told through the block structure. And that kind of blew my mind when I was like, really wrote that out and was like, oh shit, that's how a lot of the story has been told, is just like these plane by plane. Like we're going to be at this plane for like an entire good chunk of time, and then we're going to move on to the next one and really invest our time into that one and then move on to the next one. And so it's really sort of like leapfrogging from plane to plane. And I found that to be pretty like notable. And then after 2018, we moved into what's called like the post-block era. and that's when the story is told more like on a set-by-set basis. So instead of moving a plane every like 2 to 4 sets, it's like, okay, every single set we're at a new plane. And that's kind of like where we're at now, right? Like, Guy, you and I like may disagree, we may feel the same, but like right now it's just like, oh shit, like we're going fast here. Like we're on this plane, now we're on this plane, now we're on this plane, now we're on this plane. Like, oh, all this is bouncing around.
Yeah, but I personally don't mind that, because it does, as someone who came into this without the previous getting to know all the planes, now I'm getting to see all these planes, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. So that's something I don't mind personally. I know that some Vorthos people have had trouble with that because it's, too much bouncing around and you're not really getting the scope of the new planes that we're on. But that's the hard part between like being the Vorthos and the like Magic design, because Mark Rosewater's talked about how they would spend time on these 3 sets to like make sure that they can build out mechanics, make sure you could build decks around them. Now it's kind of hard because you're only getting that 1 set per time, or one set every premiere. But I think that's kind of also what's great about like the commander sets now, is like they're helping to expand on that.
Basically where I'm at is like, I feel like on one hand there's the people who are like are pro block structure, and then on the other hand there's people who are very pro post block structure. And I think both sides acknowledge that there are positives and negatives to each method. We're currently in the post block structure, and I think it's fine. Like, is it perfect? No. Is it adequate and fine? I think so. That's my personal opinion, though. You can feel free to disagree. You could like be it's often like the older school Magic players who know of when it was like the before times when it was the block structure, and they're like, oh, I miss it. And some of them, but then again, some of those players who have been playing that long don't really care, or maybe they're indifferent. So everyone's a little bit different. Anyway, so there's the post block structure after 2018, and the story is told set by set. There's also to consider throughout all of this the fact that sets are either designed mechanically using bottom-up design, or flavorfully using top-down design. And Morrow will talk about this like all the time. We're like, oh, this set was top-down, or this set was bottom-up, and people are always like, what's that mean? And then they just do a quick Google search and like, oh, so basically it was either mechanically based or flavorfully based. And needless to say, the flavorfully based sets oftentimes tie into lore more often, somewhat. Like, when I say flavor, I'm not necessarily talking about lore. I'm also talking about, like, let's take Innistrad. Like, you're taking all of the tropes from like werewolves and zombies and all of that sort of pop culture. That's more of like what I mean by flavor. But still, like, at least to me, it seems like if you lean more towards top-down flavor design, it tends to give more room for lore. But that's my own personal opinion. That isn't necessarily true. And then next up is the fact that I think this was a huge factor, was the fact that planeswalkers were introduced in Lorwyn in 2007 to 2008, because here's this new card type, planeswalkers. Then it's like, okay, now we can really start doing all of this interplanar traveling. We can do all this interplanar storytelling. Jace is going to this set, then he's going to that set, then he's going to that set, and then it's not just Jace, now it's all these other planeswalkers doing it. And sometimes this planeswalker meets this other planeswalker on their home plane. Sometimes they both meet at another plane neither of them are native to. Like, there's the whole like Gatewatch meeting on Zendikar to deal with the Eldrazi, and then that's its own intricate narrative, the Gatewatch. And so that's sort of, I felt like, was a pivotal moment with the introduction of that new, like, how mechanically you can introduce a new card type, and then you can use it as a way to influence storytelling. I just find that pretty interesting.
Yeah, and something I'll add to that too is that if you have these planeswalkers who can go to several different planes, it does give you a little more sense of, I care about this character, I can relate to this character, when they show up on a different plane that isn't the first plane that I saw, like, that kind of, like, draws you in. And, you get more invested in characters who can show up more often than characters who only show up once in a set, because they, if you want to see a character, if you want to see a legendary creature, you have to have to be on that set, or that plane, sorry. And so it's like, if I have someone I can care about who will be in multiple sets, then I become more invested in the story.
Mm-hmm. Like, you'll see them more often, you can grow an attachment to them, or a growing hatred, emotions either way.
Yeah, that too.
So one of the last few factors I have here is the introduction of Story Spotlight cards, which started in Kaladesh in 2016 to 2017. These are cards that at the bottom, at the very bottom of the card, they will literally say Story Spotlight, and they will often say like mtgstory.com or something. So like you can literally go to the website, and this small text on the bottom of the card is sort of an indicator of, hey, this card you're like holding, this is literally a key plot point in this set, whatever this card was printed in. It's just been another method of constantly indicating to the average player, like, oh, this isn't just like another card that you open from your pack or box. Like, this is like, it's just sort of a way to distinguish a card, right? And I think it's like other cards will have war relevance, but like they might not necessarily be Story Spotlight cards, which hold like a key pivotal moment in the story, right? I just think that that's a smart thing to do.
I agree.
Because at the very least, like, okay, you don't know anything about the story, like then you open this pack, and then you see that it's like, oh, here's like the Elder spell, like, well, and it's a Story Spotlight card, like, okay, like now I'm kind of motivated to like actually like find out and investigate, like, well, what's this all about then? Because product comes out all the time, you may not always be able to keep up with the story. Sometimes you're just barely keeping up with the new cards and like ordering them and having them arrive and then putting them in your new decks. And so sometimes it can be hard to fall behind. It can be pretty easy to fall behind. And so it's just sort of a way to visually distinguish. And that seems to be something WotC seems to be doing more, is just trying to visually distinguish cards from each other, especially using the border and frame of cards lately. That's a bit of a rabbit hole I'm not going to let myself go down. Anyway, one of the last points I want to bring up is the fact that other trading card games have methods of telling story, and oftentimes they have something that Magic doesn't. You see, Pokemon has an anime, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has an anime, Digimon has an anime, Magic has a like quote-unquote canceled Netflix series, and that's kind of it. Like Magic, we've talked about this, where it's like all these other trading card games benefit from having lore told through another medium, oftentimes a parallel anime series or animation of some kind, but Magic doesn't really have that.
Yeah, it's funny because like when this was first announced, it was with War the Spark, and it was like going to be a big thing, and now we're at the next event set and it's like crickets. But it's just a different form of storytelling. Some people enjoy this more than reading or listening to podcasts, but yeah, I do feel like that is one upside that personally I do tend to care more about, the ones where I can learn more about the characters and kind of like see them rather than just like imagine.
You know, you watch Pokemon, you see like Pikachu do I don't know, Thunderbolt and like in the classic anime, and you're like, oh my god, like I have such hard nostalgia. I'm gonna like buy these cards, and then that's the way to get you to buy cards. And like Yu-Gi-Oh has like an insane anime. Like the first season is so fun. All the Yu-Gi-Oh players are like, well, like current day Yu-Gi-Oh like barely. Like it's nothing like the anime. The rules are totally different. Like sometimes they pay homage to the originals, like Blue Eyes White Dragon and Dark Magician and like Gate Guardian, but like more or less like the real card game is totally different. It doesn't matter. The fact is they have storytelling through another medium like this anime, and it's converted a lot of like viewers into card game players, and that's the point. That's what it's really all about. So for any of you like nitpickers out there, just like chill.
Yeah.
All right. So now that we've kind of been looking at the big picture, I'd like to kind of start narrowing in. 30 minutes into bullshitting about this podcast already. I'd like to start moving into sort of like the more recent events that have happened within Magic. And by that, I mean like within the last 2 years, just so all of us are like kind of up to speed and kind of on the same page here.
Yeah. So here we're going to kind of go into like the different sets that like lead up to March of the Machines, because it's not every set that, has a pivotal story moment. So we're just kind of like highlighting what do you need to know. So first we have Theros Beyond Death, which was back in 2020. This is when Elspeth returns from the underworld, which she'll be an important pivotal character in the story moving forward.
Hindsight.
Yep. And so then Ashiok, who is another planeswalker on Theros, goes into Elspeth's dreams and learns of the Phyrexians. So that kind of gives us a hint that, Phyrexians are coming up at some point. 1 year later, we're on Kaldheim, and it's like a new set. It's a new setting, new plane that we had only heard about previously, and it's like, oh, what could go wrong here? But then Vorinclex, a one of the 5 predators of New Phyrexia shows up, and you're like, what the fuck is going on? Yeah, everyone was like,
what the fuck is this going on?
Yeah, and so Vorinclex steals a seed from the World Tree. And if you don't know what the World Tree is, it is a giant tree on Kaldheim that connects the different realms of Kaldheim.
Yes.
So it's not necessarily going to 9 different planes, but it's going to 9 different realms. It's all within Kaldheim. They all exist within the same plane, but the World Tree is what connects them and allows you to travel through them. All right.
It's like planes within planes, but different.
Yes, kind of. 1 year later, so another year goes by, and we're on Kamigawa again. So this is Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, and we learned that Jin Gitaxias is on Kamigawa, and we're like, okay, what is going on? We shouldn't be seeing Praetors on other planes because they cannot planeswalk. Only planeswalkers can do that. So how is this going on? So we learned that Jin is on Kamigawa because Tezzeret is able to, get Praetors onto different planes. And Jin is working on a process of trying to complete a planeswalker. And he is successful and does it first to Tamio.
Can I just say, like, this, for me, personally, this was the moment where I'm like, oh, shit's about to go down, and I am excited for it. Because, like, I was like, there's real stakes. There's real consequences that are going down. Like, this is monumental for, like, the Phyrexians, a.k.a. Jin Gitaxias, to have completed a Planeswalker and now made, like, a Planeswalker, like, part of Phyrexia.
Yeah.
I was like,
it was
shit.
Pretty big. I remember the reveal, and it was just like, what the fuck is going on?
Because Tamio is also a beloved character, and so people were like, no, what? No.
Yeah. So shortly after, we then go to New Capenna, which is where we learn about Halo, which is a magical substance that Phyrexians don't like. We also learned that the Phyrexians tried to invade there once before. And we also learned that Urabrask is leading a rebellion, and is hiding out there, trying to, like, I don't know, just get ready. Because he knows that they are... So Urabrask is a little different from all the other Praetors. He doesn't necessarily believe in completion of all the planes. He kind of believes in Phyrexia's vision, but still kind of in the red in him is like, does want there to be some individuality and creativity. But yeah, so that's why he's like, I don't agree with Elishnorn's plan. So then we get to Dominaria United, and this is where Sheoldred shows up and starts the invasion of Dominaria. There's some sleeper agents, and we learned that Ajani is also one of those sleeper agents, and he was completed and ends up killing Jaya, who is a beloved mentor to Chandra. So that was pretty big. I remember that was a story spotlight card.
This was also one of those pivotal moments for me personally that I'm like, oh shit, now they've completed Ajani and then added to like their ranks, and like then that completed Planeswalker has actually done something in the form of like killing another well-beloved Planeswalker. Like, oh my god, like, and as far as we know, like, there's no way to reverse this. So I'm like, oh shit, like, WotC's choosing to like take our beloved characters and be like, there's real stakes here. Oh fuck.
Yeah. And so there's a side story. I don't know quite where it happens, but it's important to mention. They just kind of released it on the MTG site as like a update, but it's a side story. It's like basically one chapter where Ashiok goes to warn Elishnorn of Elspeth, and Elishnorn's like, I don't like that name. And it's like, okay, so we know that Elspeth is going to be a relevant and important character. Alright, so on Dominaria United, they also they created a Sylex, and they need to learn how to detonate this, because they're like, this happened once during the Brothers' War, which happened long ago. It was between, like, Urza and Mishra. It was the conflict, and there was, like, a big battle. So Teferi learns how to time travel, goes back, learns how to detonate the Sylex from Urza, but then is lost in time as his soul is detached, while, you know, he's in, like, kind of present time. I think, like, there's some Planeswalkers who are trying to fight him off and fight off some Phyrexians who are invading, and then it's like, I'm getting a little muddled, but basically Teferi finds himself lost, and he's on a a familiar place, and we're like, ooh, what is this familiar place that you are on? But like, everyone knew it was going to be Zhalfir. I guess, like, you know, 35 minutes into this, spoiler warnings.
Oh,
sorry,
shit, I forgot to say that.
Yeah, like, you know, just take this audio clip and just say, like, 35 minutes in, spoiler warning, and it's like, it's only been 2 minutes. What are you talking about? But yeah, good. Thank you for letting us know. Alright, so we're at All Will Be One, which is the set right before March of the Machines. And so this is where we learn of Realmbreaker, who is a tree that is based off of the World Tree from Kaldheim. We learned that this is what allows, or will allow the Phyrexians to travel across the multiverse and complete every plane. And it's like, oh my god. So the plan is to detonate the Sylex that they created to destroy Phyrexia before this goes off. 5 Planeswalkers in this set are completed. Jace, Vraska, Nissa, Luca, and Nahiri.
Mm-hmm.
And so Jace is about to detonate the Sylex as Realmbreaker is kind of going into the different planes, so Phyrexia can begin its invasion. Elspeth, though, is like, if we take this now, it might destroy other planes that are innocent. So she takes it and goes off into the, the unknown, the Blind Eternities. That's what it's called.
Yeah. There's a lot of very specific niche names. This is why we don't get into lore.
Right. So she basically disappears with it, and it's like, okay, so that plan didn't work. Where is she? And now Phyrexia's invasion begins. So that's kind of the highlights leading up to March of the Machines.
Yeah. And again, I was like, oh shit, like more planeswalkers have been completed. Like, nobody really cared about Luca, but like all the other ones, like Nahiri, people were devastated. Nissa, people were fucking absolutely like torn. Like Vraska and especially Jace, that was the moment I'm like, wow, they completed Jace, like the most well-known planeswalker in all of Magic. This is when I got a little bit nervous. I'm like, they really did this? Wow, WotC's finally like showing some chops here. like killing your darlings here. I'm like, wow.
Yeah, I mean, Jace is definitely the most well-known or like poster child of Magic. I mean, he seems to be like the most notable. So,
all right. So now we've moved into the current set, which is March of the Machines, and I'd like to just kind of do a chapter by chapter like breakdown of like the few important events that have to happen each time. So, like, keep in mind, each of these are done by different writers, and I think it's kind of incredible that through like organization, like you take all these different writers and you try to form a cohesive narrative, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But basically, chapter 1, Shieldred is killed by Elish Norn. Dun dun dun. Backstabbed. Elish Norn is about to go on a fucking rampage. Shieldred fucking dead. People were really sad. Shieldred is one of like Commander players' favorite Praetors. I guess you could say like there's a demographic of Commander players for each Praetor, but anyway, there gets to be a whole bunch of planeswalkers that are completed on various planes. So that gets started. Chapter 2. Liliana is really sad that Jace is completed. She's like, aww. And then a bunch of planeswalkers talk in a room. Chapter 3. Tamio goes to Kamigawa. Kaya and Kaito are there, also on Kamigawa. And then the Wanderer swoops in and chops off Tamio's head very mercifully and sort of like ends her suffering. And it's like, oh, shit. Chapter 4. Tyvar is on Kaldheim, and people are suddenly very horny for Tyvar because Tyvar sounds like a cool dude who actually gets things done and is just like super chill. And
he seems to have big himbo energy, is from what I've gathered.
And then you find out that Coma, that giant serpent thing on Kaldheim, has become Phyrexianized. So that's pretty metal. Literally. Then there's the whole invasion of Kaldheim. Pianalar and Saheeli are on Kaladesh for some reason. Then there's the invasion of Capenna, and Atraxa is on Capenna. Chapter 5. Invasion of Strixhaven, basically. And then there's the Phyrexianization of the various professors, and all the professors are walking down the hall scaring all the kids. Liliana and Dina are there. Quint, that elephant legendary creature, turns out they become a planeswalker. Just, okay. Now we have an elephant planeswalker. Chapter 6. There's the invasion of Ikoria. Vivian and Vadrock are there. Luca is dead. Nobody was sad about it. And then apparently, like, the crystals on Ikoria kind of absorb Phyrexian oil and kind of neutralize it. Maybe? Question mark. Chapter 7. Chandra and Ren move to wherever Realmbreaker is. Koth is also there. Urabrask opposes Elishnorn because Urabrask is all red, and he's like, I'm individualistic. And then Nissa confronts Chandra in a very sad and epic moment, because remember, Nissa is Phyrexianized, and there's sort of... it's kind of an emotional moment because, like, there's a whole...
They're dating.
They're dating, and then there's a whole bunch of drama in terms of, like, whether or not they are, because WotC has sort of backtracked on that, and there's been a huge bunch of player backlash, and then that's... I'm not going to get into that right now. Chapter 8, Invasion of Ixalan. Huatli is there. Itali has been Phyrexianized, and is basically the new Blightsteel. Chapter 9.
Oh my god, I can't wait to talk about that later.
Chapter 9, Invasion of Innistrad. Gissa and Geralf are there. That's all I really had to say. Chapter 10, Invasion of Eldraine. Rankle and Chulainn are there. Torbrand is also there. Ayara has been Phyrexianized, and there's like a ring of 3 wishes. Chapter 11. God, how many chapters are there? There's fucking 17. I'm almost done. Ajani is on Theros and like to corrupt shit. Elspeth is on Theros. Elspeth sees Karn and Elishnorn. Sarah, remember Sarah, the angel, makes Elspeth an angel. Holy shit, that's important. And killing, like, Elspeth kind of comes to the realization that killing even if Elspeth were to kill Elishnorn, it's kind of just a temporary thing, because, like, Phyrexia as a whole still exists and persists, and, like, new leaders will just eventually emerge. And that's kind of a profound moment. When I read that, I'm just like, oh shit, you can kill all the leaders, but, like, the all the oil and shit still exists, and, like, it's not just gonna magically go away. Chapter 12. Elspeth stops Jin-Gitaxias from striking Karn. Elspeth fights Elishnorn. Pretty big moment. Chapter 13. A group of our heroes, like, move towards the World Tree and encounter Nissa. Malira is there and gets stabbed. Ren was dying since Ren wasn't grafted to a tree anymore. Ren begins grafting to the Realmbreaker, which is a tree because of, it's a seed. It's originally a seed from the World Tree. Ren and Realmbreaker sort of are like fighting and like making out, and then they find Teferi in Zalfir. God, this just sounds like such a fever dream. Chapter 14, there's Capenna, and Atraxa is crushed by a building, ? Kind of. Chapter 15, Ravnica. Vraska kills like all of the Azorius Guild in a very graphic and twisted way that's sort of like bittersweet based on how she as a Gorgon was treated by the like guilds on Ravnica, and how she's like the only Gorgon left, and it's just like, oh shit, this is actually a really well written chapter, and this makes me really sad, and oh fuck. Vraska converts the Golgari Guild to Phyrexia. Rao does something with Vraska. Vraska is dying and dreams of Jace as she's dying, and then Vraska's body suddenly goes MIA, and it's like, where's the body? Woo! We can't confirm death because the body's not here. And this was a really great chapter. It was actually well written. Chapter 16, Kaya kills Heliod. Heliod is also Phyrexianized, by the way, because all the followers of Heliod got Phyrexianized, and that in turn Phyrexianized the gods. Apparently, that can happen. Phyrexian forces were beginning to not aid Elishnorn as Elishnorn started to have kind of a temper tantrum and being like, eh. And then Jin-Gitaxias was devoured by his own machines. Vorinclex is killed by some random soldiers. Karn dismembers a weakened Elishnorn in kind of like a metal way, where like Karn's this gentle giant, or at least that's how he's been portrayed all these years. And now he's just like, all right, this needs to be done. Like, Elishnorn, yoink, yoink, yoink. Okay, now you're in pieces. Chapter 17, Karn, like, no longer has his Planeswalker Spark, and Malira sacrifices herself because she's dying and she's been stabbed, and she's like, okay, well, might as well use my dying breath to bring back Ajani, Nissa, and Nahiri. And that was the moment I'm like, what? Okay, well, now they're not.
Wait, she does not bring back Nahiri.
You're right. I'm saying
I deleted that. I tried to delete it quick enough, and I was like, no!
You're fine. I'm saying a lot of words. A lot of shit happened. Malira sacrifices herself because she was stabbed, and she's like, okay, with my dying breath, bring back a Johnny and Nissa. And now apparently, like, you know, Phyrexian oil maybe isn't as permanent as we once thought, and completion can be reversed, and now people are like, yeah. All right, so that was basically my terrible summary of March of the Machines. I will pause for applause. Thank you. All right. What else? So, like, all this happened. Then some of this was captured in the story spotlight cards on March of the Machines. I'm just looking through all of them now. Like, Corrupted Conviction has, like, a Johnny, like, fucking ending Shieldred. Elspeth's Smite is literally Elspeth stabbing Elish Norn. There's the introduction of battle cards, which I'm not going to get into, but it's like, here's the invasion of this plane. Here's the invasion of this plane. Some of these planes you've never seen before. Foreshadowing for future sets that may be visited. I don't know. That'd be kind of cool. What do you think, Guy?
I know that this is kind of just side tangent, but every battle does visit a plane we know of.
Yes,
Not everyone we've been to and have had a full set on, but we have seen or know of all these planes. And I like how, you know, even though we haven't been to all these planes, we do still now kind of get like a taste of it, just like a little bit. Because that was what was cool about March of the Machines too, is like you could have all this flavor from all these different sets just kind of like looped in pretty easily.
Yeah. So I'm excited about that. So that was the whole like set. Basically, there's all the story spotlight cards, but I still had like a whole bunch of questions. Part of that is because I binged all of it in like 4 hours, and I'm just like, some of this didn't quite stick. Some of this I'm slightly misremembering. But there's also like shit that I am like, wait, is this just like setting up for like future things? Like there's the card Ichor Drinker, and it's like, if you look at the art, it's like this vampire drinking on this person's arm, and it looks like a Phyrexianized Ashnod, but nothing in the story indicates that Ashnod was Phyrexianized. Nothing in that card's...
You mean Ashiok.
That's what I meant to say.
Right.
Thank you. I'm saying words really fast right now. And it's like there's nothing in the flavor text that says Ashiok, but it looks like Ashiok, like if Ashnod was Phyrexianized, but like I don't know, and I need to know because that's terrifying. Because it's also been like implied like Ashiok like might use Phyrexians or something based on like learning like years ago about them. So I'm just like, this could be even bigger of a threat, but maybe not. Maybe Ashiok is just Phyrexianized. Also, there's the card Atraxa's Fall, which I guess depicts Atraxa's death, because in the story it's sort of like brief and anticlimactic. And at least as a commander player, Atraxa's death is big because like Atraxa is one of the most popular commanders in general. I don't think it's the number one anymore, but it's still, Atraxa is still one of the most popular commanders ever made. So it's sort of like, it's sort of interesting to be like, oh, like here's how Atraxa dies. Bleh. Then like, you know, there's also like the Realm Breaker, the Invasion Tree, and Tribute to the World Tree. So like the World Tree is dead, and that's really sad. And like, I'm just like, are we gonna go back to Kaldheim? Are we ever gonna see like the consequences of that? And I'm still just left with a whole bunch of questions. And I guess maybe time will tell on some of those.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of those things. I guess it's good that we will kind of like bounce around several sets, because we will be able to see the impact of all of them after Phyrexia. I feel like the next year worth of sets is going to kind of be like, how did Phyrexia, you know, impact us?
And I mean, I'm hoping that's the whole point of Aftermath, is seeing, you know, the aftermath
that
of
too.
war.
Yes, that too.
I'm really hoping that that'll be like, explored more because, it does feel like so much happened in this set that, like, I understand, like, you only have so many cards you can print. You can't tell it all. I've learned that listening through Drive to Work, so I understand, like, all right, yeah, in the next set, show more of, like, the aftermath of the war. By all means, please do. All right, so now that we've talked about lore from, like, the broad scale, and now we've been narrowing it to the last 2 years, and now to, like, the most recent set, kind of want to move into the next section, which is just our overall thoughts. So, the first thought I have is that there are no stakes. Well, that's not entirely true. I'd say that there are, like, our stakes, they're just kind of weak. Because, like, as I said earlier, when Tamio got completed, I was like, oh, fuck, dude. Like, I really care about reading the story now, because it's like, at the time, it's like, there's no way to reverse completion, and, like, Tamio was beloved, and then, like, Johnny got completed, and then, like, now Jason, like, all these other, like truly heavy hitting Planeswalkers got completed. I was like, oh, fuck. And then it's like, oh, well, completion can be reversed in these specific situations, and might be reversed by, like, crystals on Ikoria and shit. And also Elspeth and Karn, it's been explained within the last set, are immune to Phyresis. Only those two, though. And so I'm just left sort of like, it felt sort of like, oh, there were stakes and I really cared. And then this set came out and, like, the stakes were kind of dropped, and I therefore don't care as much.
Yeah, that's definitely the biggest complaint that I've seen. I went through, like, Reddit to just kind of, like, get some highlights of, like, what are people's thoughts on stories. And the reverse completion has definitely been, like, the biggest letdown, because I think people at least wanted to explore that more, in the sense of, like, okay, the Praetors are likely to go, who's our new Phyrexian villains? It's these completed Planeswalkers who can travel the multiverse, but turns out not really going to be a threat.
Like, I want there to be consequences for actions, and if it can all just be retconned at the end and just, like, be reversed, it's like, well, there really didn't feel like there were actually any stakes after all.
Well, okay, yeah. That I might disagree with a little, just because, so, from my understanding, completion, you're not necessarily in control of yourself. So, imagine, like, you were taken over and you killed somebody. Okay. And then suddenly you have control of your body again. Even though it's like, I didn't have control of my body over killing that person, I still did that. And that has consequences, and that I'm basically describing the situation with Ajani and Jaya.
That is true.
Where even though, yes, I didn't mean to do that, that was not my will doing, it's still something that I've done, and I have to live with that. So I do think that that's kind of still something that is impactful for the story moving forward.
Yeah. And I will say, like, Magic story doesn't have to be, like, super dark. It doesn't have to be like, oh, well, like, this terrible thing happened to this, like, beloved character, and now they're, like, dark forever, and, like, you're never allowed nice things. And because it's like, I think back to, like, listening about how Innistrad was a really dark set, and, like, after being there for, like, a whole block, players were like, this is really dark, like, we need something a bit more lighthearted. It's like there is a balance between, like, lighthearted sets and dark sets. All of Magic does not need to be a dark set, but at the same time, it's like, I do want there to be, like, real stakes to the story, to, like, be engaged. Because if after every, like, couple years, it's like, basically, like, all these negative things can be undone, and basically everyone's kind of all right after a couple years of rewriting things, like, it's like, oh, I can't get into the story then.
Yeah, I mean,
even if things do turn out well, it's like, well, I need there to have been the potential for, like, long-lasting negative things to have happened. Is what I'm saying making sense?
I agree, because one thing that I would say is, like, I think with War of the Spark, there were actually a little more stakes in place because Gideon did have to sacrifice his life in order to give Liliana the ability to overcome her destruction to defeat Nicol Bolas. That is a real stake, and that has had impact moving forward, especially on Liliana's character. Now, nothing like that necessarily happened on this story. I know that Melira did have to sacrifice herself. However, we don't see Melira nearly as often as we do with Liliana or Gideon, so there's not nearly as strong of a connection to these characters where I feel like the emotional connection to this stake, or like I don't feel the weight of it nearly as much, because I'm just like, Melira is some character we see once every 8 years, basically.
True. Also, you know what I just realized?
What?
How your fiance is a writer.
I honestly thought, like, should I ask her? But I did not want to bring her into this. I was like, hey, can you read all of this and then, give us some insights to what you think? I was like, I'm not doing that to her.
Yeah. I also thought about that as I bring it up, where I'm just like, oh, that's such a heavy burden to be like, hey, can you just read all of this, like 30 years worth of lore, and like, okay, maybe just like the last year.
You also have a month to do it, at most.
Also, you have your own life and your own book you're writing. It's like,
yeah.
I just find it funny, like, oh, maybe we should have had like an actual experienced writer, at least give it like some nuggets of wisdom. But
we can't afford her, if I'm being honest. This podcast is so on a budget. Her consultant rates are way too high for us to like consider.
True. All right. Next point we have on overall thoughts, at least for me, is that characters rarely die. And this is a criticism not of just the latest set, but just like ever since lore has existed. And it's just the fact that like the classic example for me is like War of the Spark. Here is the interplanar war. Bolas is gathering all the planeswalkers onto one plane and trying to steal all of their sparks with the Elder spell. Shit is real. Shit is epic. There's like war is in the title. This is a war. And how many people die? 3 characters.
Yeah.
You would expect more. And that was one of the main critiques, or a lot of critiques of that set and of that novel. But that was one of the main ones, was that, wow, this is a war and only like 3 people died. People were kind of okay with Domri Raid. People were kind of okay with Dak Faden. I will say, like, Gideon Jura has died. And for a lot of people, including myself, that one did mean something. Because it's like, oh, I liked Gideon. There was a lot to like about him. He was a good dude. And the fact that, as far as we can tell, I may get retconned, but as far as we can tell, like, Gideon is truly dead and is not being revived. But Magic, like, rarely ever kills its characters. It's like from a marketing perspective, I kind of get it, because it's like, oh, you spend this time like developing them, and like sometimes it takes time for characters to like, for the players to like them. For example, I've listened to a lot of like Maro's podcast, and it took a lot of the players to eventually like Ajani, but now Ajani is a really beloved planeswalker, one of the most beloved. Even so, characters rarely dying is an issue for me. It's like, again, I need there to be stakes. I need there to be potential consequences with meaningful consequences.
Yeah, I do agree, or I kind of agree, because we did get a lot of deaths in this set. I'm just gonna rattle off a list. Shieldred, Jin, Urabrask, Vorinclex, Elish Norn all died really. We kind of expected that. Atraxa, Luca, Tamio. Nahiri is thought to be dead at the moment. However, we already know that she's not because of artwork from Aftermath. So let's disregard that. We got Ren, who is kind of dead, is now a seed being planted into the earth to be reborn. Atali coma. A lot of the Theros gods are now gone, and some of the Strixhaven dragons. So, okay, we do have a lot of deaths, but when you have so many deaths too, it's harder to care about them and to like focus in on their deaths, because death is a pretty impactful moment, and it's something that, you know, should not be taken lightly. So when you have all these deaths and now it's just like what's going on kind of thing, like it's hard to like for me to now say like, oh, I care about this death, but like also you died and you died. There's no emotional stake for me, and I feel like that's also kind of how a lot of people feel, where too many deaths kind of make it hard for you to care about what's going on. Did you even know Tybalt died?
You know, I saw the art where like Tyvar was like choking him with one arm and just like about to like end him, but I wasn't fully sure. Again, I binged all the lore in 4 hours.
Yeah, so it's kind of, again, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't get enough time on each of these deaths to care about them. So many happened all at once. It's like you should have a couple, or like one here or there leading up to this, to just kind of like, you know, give me those stakes to care about as I'm reading the story.
You know, I think you bring up a good point. For me, the takeaway is there needs to be sort of a happy medium. You need to not be on the extreme of never killing your characters, but you can't be on the other extreme of just like kill a fuck ton to where like players can't even keep track.
Exactly.
Well, just have a few other points here, at least sort of relating to dying, is the whole like coming back to life or getting put aside for a future set sort of trope, where like they don't die because they got revived, or more so the fact that they got like put aside for a future set. For example, War of the Spark. Nicol Bolas has been now put in the meditation realm with Ugin, and so on one hand I kind of get this, because like Nicol Bolas next to all of Phyrexia is like one of the big bad antagonistic forces in all of the story of Magic. So like I kind of get it for like keeping Nicol Bolas around, but like when you do that with other characters, it's like you better have like a really good reason to like bring them back in the future, like have it be really meaningful and purposeful, because otherwise I'm like, just what are you doing with them? Like, make up your mind.
Yeah, I mean, it felt lazy to me that it's not quite the same where they switched Zhalfir with Phyrexia, and so it's not like Phyrexia can't be touched. You can't planeswalk there. It's gone, or it's like in a untouched corner of the multiverse. And that's kind of the same with the meditation realm, where it's like
kind of
you can't really get there, and only like Jace is the only one who knows how to get there, and I guess Ugin.
Yep.
But you know, it's like, why not just kill them off? Like, unless that they're going to have a redemption arc, which maybe Bolas does get, but like, you can't just do that for both Bolas and the Phyrexians. So, I don't know. It seems lazy to me. Just like, your solution is very similar both of these times around.
Yeah.
That might be harsh, but
I mean, I kind of get it.
feel.
Like, I kind of get it. Like, Nicol Bolas is like one of the big bad antagonistic forces, and like sometimes you want to put him aside so you can do like a year or two's worth of like other story without having to like, and then come back to Nicol Bolas like being in the story and like have the potential for it to be like whatever has changed in those like 1 to 2 years. Like now the reintroduction of Nicol Bolas has like higher stakes than if they were to have never been imprisoned or so. Like I'm sort of in the middle, but it's still a trope that I'm like, you do this a lot, WotC. Like, not sure I like this. Another example, aside from Nicol Bolas, is Vraska, like from the latest set, where like they never found Vraska's body after Vraska was dying and dreaming of Jace in her like memory palace and having this like really emotional, sweet dream. It's like, so now it's sort of like, oh, like until we know a body, like Vraska is like kind of considered not dead. Like, when will we see Vraska again? Is she still going to be completed when we see her again? Is she not? Yeah. It's
Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? And then I think the last note is kind of like a really minor note, but I still wanted to talk about it briefly, which is like, I've played enough sets where I'm like, oh shit. Like, a lot of these sets seem to really revolve around like this artifact or something. Like, for example, there's the Golgothian Silax. Then there's Karn's Silex. Then there's the Filigree Silex. Then there's Urza's Silex. There's a whole bunch of Silexes. By the way, they really like to use that. And then like, what was it? It was like one of the Zendikar sets. Like there's the Lithoform engine, and I thought the Lithoform engine was going to play a really big role, and it was like only relevant to that one set. And then there was Blackblade Reforged, which only played a significance in War of the Spark, and even then it was sort of a what's the term? It's sort of like a false plot point where like, oh, it ended up not actually being like what the heroes needed. Then there's like Bolas's Citadel.
Red herring.
Yeah, a red herring, thank you. Then there's like the Mirari, which is a super important object in the history of Mirrodin. Then there's the Planar Bridge, which has allowed like all the Praetors like to travel as if they were planeswalkers. And like then there's like Realm Breaker, like then there's like the Chain Veil, which Liliana has used. Then there's like the Immortal Sun, which has been really important in certain plot beats. Then there's the Might Stone and the Meek Stone, when like we got more cards related to like the time of Urza and Mishra. Then you got like the Weatherlight, like the actual ship. And so my point is like there's all these like legendary artifacts that like have had these important plot beats. So now every set I'm just like, all right, are there any like legendary artifacts or legendary this or that I should really pay attention to? Because it's like that seems to be like the big like plot device. And so I'm just sort of like, I just kind of like have seen enough sets where I'm like, okay, like what's the big object of this set? And just sort of chuckle. Now you may be like screaming at your screen right now, and like I hear you like, Blake, that's not always the case. Sometimes it's not an artifact. Sometimes it's on a land, such as the World Tree, which lets you tap for like any color of mana if you have enough lands. Or it's like the Great Aurora, which is not an artifact, and it kind of depicts like the change of like Lorwyn into Shadowmoor. And it's like, okay, I grant you that, but it still kind of stands like a lot of sets have these like key objects as like one of the main focuses or like struggles over for these sets. Am I wrong?
It's more often than not that it's artifacts than anything else.
Yeah. So
there are examples, but it's not like it's more artifacts. Yes, I agree with you.
Yeah. So what is it, like Aftermath? I'm like low-key thinking, is there like a fucking legendary artifact that's gonna like be pivotal to the lore of Aftermath? We'll find out. There's like a 50-50 chance.
It kind of makes sense in the sense of how do you depict something? Like, I feel like that is just the easiest form of storytelling is like, you have King Arthur and his sword. You have, like, I don't know, like in The Little Mermaid, it's the trident. There is always like some kind of physical momentum that does bear weight on the story. So it's not that it's not like uncommon, but it's, because I would feel weird if I guess, like, for War of the Spark, you did have the Elder spell that was a sorcery that played a big part in I'd say that bared more weight than like Bolas's Citadel, but say whatever. But yeah, it is oftentimes artifacts.
Yeah, I just found that kind of interesting. So, wrapping up here, Guy, how do you currently feel about Magic lore as of today? Like, just generally speaking.
I personally don't feel angry or like it's not... I don't think the lore's terrible, is my thing. It's just, I think it's been hard to get into because of the different mediums of them trying to tell the story. I think they need to pick a better lane of how to depict it, how to get people interested. I think the MTG Lore podcast is a great place to start. An anime or visual medium of that would also be great. But yeah, because I think the story itself is like fine. The story is better at, okay, hot take maybe, but like the story is better than like a majority of Yu-Gi-Oh! If we're being honest. Like, how many people die in Yu-Gi-Oh? Nobody dies because they go to the Shadow Realm. Like, there's no stakes there. They all get revived at the end. It's like, oh, nobody ever really died. Yeah. So it does seem like, it does have that, but it's like, as people growing into adulthood, we do want there to be some darker elements, not necessarily like make it incredibly dark, but it is a children's card game at heart, so it's not like you can go full, oh man, what's a dark story to tell? I don't know,
brother.
But you get
pick any Brothers Grimm story.
Yeah, sure. Original. Or like Breaking Bad. I don't know, like nothing like terribly
Old Boy.
Oh my god, yeah, there you go. Don't watch that movie, but watch that movie. It's a good movie.
I'm kind of surprised by what you said because of how similar I feel in almost every aspect. Where I feel like in order to like keep selling the card game, ultimately like the mechanics and the playability of cards needs to come first. And then like the lore is sort of like the whipped cream and the cherry on top in terms of pure necessity lens.
Yes.
That being said, I kind of want to have my cake and eat it too. Like I want both. I want like playable cards with like well thought out mechanics and a well thought out, cohesive, internally consistent and comprehensive lore as well, because I feel like that's just another axis in which to get my friends into it. Because sometimes, a lot of friends, if I tell them like, oh, I play Magic, it's like, oh, all right, here's this super nerdy card game. It's really complicated. I don't care. But like maybe I'll be able to more easily get them into it if I can get them emotionally invested into like, say, Nissa or Vraska or Jace. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes it doesn't. But again, it would just be another avenue in which to get more people in, as if the story and narrative was internally consistent and cohesive and compelling.
Yes, I agree.
Also, I love watching Yu-Gi-Oh! YouTube lore videos because I find them hilarious, because you get shit like Gogi Gagi Gigos, real card name by the way, original lore and like how it's changed, and that shit's funny.
Blake, I'm pretty sure that's a parody. I don't think that's actually real.
I don't know. Are you sure?
I'm gonna say I'm 85% sure. I'm pretty sure like those are made up. But no, I've seen them too, and I'm like, okay, I wish this were real, but I don't. I'm like 85% sure this is made up, because like, where are you getting this information? Like, who told you?
I feel like this just proves my point. Like players want to have compelling lore on top of playable mechanics. Right?
Yeah, the emotional connection to playing this card game that we invest money and time into is, it would be nicer to, care about some of the characters.
Okay, I swear to God, we're going to end this episode like real soon. I did just think of one other question to ask you, though. Okay,
what is it?
With the rise of...
Is it who is my favorite character? Well, I can go off. What's your question? I'm sorry.
Well, now I'm kind of curious too. Well, with the rise of Commander's popularity over the last couple of years, most Commanders are legendary creatures, and oftentimes in the past, it's been able to be where each of these legendary creatures has had some lore described about it. For example, like one of my first commanders was Una, Queen of the Fae. There's a lot of lore about her. One of your favorite commanders is Absent Angel of Hope. There's a lot of lore about her. But it seems like as Commander has grown in popularity, there's been more legendary creatures, and the lore hasn't really been able to keep pace with that. Do you agree with that? And if so, like, what do you think are the consequences of that?
One, I think you already answered the question of who's my favorite character. Because obviously we've done an episode where we've talked about our favorite characters. So, checkmate. Two, I don't think I know enough to make a confident statement about that. Because, yes, when there are 50 new legendary creatures per set, I would think that that's hard to keep up and give each character a compelling backstory.
Yeah.
However, I don't... again, I've only really dived into the lore for this set, so I can't confidently say whether or not they're doing a good job of keeping up with it. I would imagine probably not.
I was just kind of curious, because I feel like, at least my answer, it feels like if you're an old school Commander player, like each of your like older commanders has some bit of lore, even if it's just a little bit, whereas like modern day currently, like they're just pumping out so many legendary creatures that like there's not enough lore for each of them, and it makes it harder to emotionally connect, and that's just my opinion. Yeah.
I was about to say, Skithrix has so little lore to him.
That's true.
That I'm like, I wish there was more. I was hoping he'd be in the more recent
got the reprint, right?
He got the reprints are reprints. Like, it's not like you get more story to that, but yeah, so it's fine.
All right, that was sort of our episode about Magic the Gathering lore, and just sort of getting all that stuff off of our chest, at least my chest. I feel a little bit better.
Yeah. All right, so we are the Wizard Staff Podcast. You can listen to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere else you like to listen to your podcast. Make sure to leave a like and review. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WizardStaff101. Send us an email at thewizardstaff101@gmail.com if you want to bitch and complain about how stupid we are. Thank you for listening, and we hope you have a great night. Sweet dreams.
Peace out.